them different, but we are able to do fluid flow prediction in real time, which wouldn't be possible with a standard CFD solver because it's way too slow. And we are collecting PIV data in the lab. This is in water. We also will be extending to air. And as you can see, this neural operators are much more accurate, even when you go to long-term prediction, right, compared to standard neural networks like convolutional neural networks. And so this has the ability to capture those complexities well. But before we get to the neural operators, I want to start with work where we wanted to ask, what if you could learn online? So there's no information offline, right? So that's kind of like the question. If you have no knowledge offline, how quickly would you be learning online using reinforcement learning? And even when there is very high turbulence, I think the Reynolds numbers we chose were it's around 230,000. So it's fairly turbulent. Of course, there's much higher turbulence in the real world. But for these kind of experiments, because it's learning just online how to control, and so we wanted to ask how well it's able to do that. And what you can see here in the main results is in the wind tunnel, it took less than 9 minutes to effectively do reinforcement learning and achieve state-of-the-art disturbance rejection, even under very high turbulence. And this is much better than previous reinforcement learning methods that did not use the model. So we are learning a model which makes it much better for generalization, and also requires much less data. So it requires about 8 times less data and better performance, right? So this one is very fast, and you can also tune it to new conditions much, much faster. And we took the industry standard PID control, and this reinforcement learning method is better by more than 45%. So it's better than the existing methods. It's better than other model-free reinforcement learning methods, right? So here we're capturing the good inductive biases, and we're trying to learn a model of dynamics that can hopefully generalize to new conditions. And we're able to really also there is some nice theoretical guarantees that we provide that it is able to have like low regret, and it's able to learn effectively. And indeed, what we want to like simulate are like turbulent conditions. And what we have is like a symmetric airfoil, and it's in with motorized trailing flaps. So I think you'll see here. So this is like the field example here of vorticity that we'll be generating. And this is kind of in the wind tunnel. So we have this airfoil, and we are kind of like having it be under these wind conditions. As I said, Reynolds number around 230,000, many other details here. But the idea is, can you just use reinforcement learning and learn to control and stabilize this wing? And as you can see, there are flow sensors on it. And so what if we utilize that information and online control this? And what makes this challenging from the learning perspective is this is partial observed, right? You only have a few flow sensors, and so you really need the history as well. So you cannot just rely on the current sensor observation because the history matters, right? So you also need to take that into account. And indeed, you can use a standard deep neural network, and that's what model-free reinforcement learning does. It just, right, so you just directly learn for a policy. Whereas here, we'll learn a model of the dynamics, and we'll also give it good inductive bias. And as you can imagine, nice inductive bias can be a basis like Fourier basis, and we see that that is much more effective because it learns quicker, it learns with less amount of data. And so that's what is, will better than using a very standard neural network. And so that's what we call Falcon, which is for Fourier adaptive learning and control. And so it's really utilizing, the fact that a lot of this fluid dynamics we can model well in the Fourier domain. And we'll also see that in the next work of neural operators. And we can incorporate this. And the idea is really to like kind of like think about learning the model, right? So this is the model of dynamics. We will use the Fourier basis for this, and we'll learn it based on not just the current observations but also the history. So we'll keep up, updating this learn coefficients in the Fourier basis periodically. But we'll also have online control through MPC, right? So we'll take the model and we'll use model predictive control, and we will use the, of course, the sensor observations and update the MPC and do the control. So that part is fairly standard, right? Once you have a model, you do MPC. But the fact is, we are learning the model and we are periodically updating the model as we are running through this. And so there is like kind of, right, some details. There's like a warm up cycle, and you have enough cycles of vortex shedding, so kind of this kind of behavior, and you can learn that. And so, as you can see, this is what I quickly summarized in the beginning. Our method requires much fewer samples, an order of magnitude fewer samples than model-free methods. So the other methods there, except the first one, are model-free reinforcement learning, right? So they do not learn a model of dynamics, and so they need much more samples. And the thing to also look here is like kind of, right, how much lift and what is especially the standard deviation of the lift. So can you like reduce the variance here as well? And here what you see is we are obtaining state of the art, and we are able to do better than the PID control, which has no learning, right? It's assuming a fixed model. So there is benefit in learning the model from data rather than just using the fixed model. And so, yeah, that's the idea. Like you can do training which is very fast using fewer samples. As I mentioned, in this specific experiment, we only needed about 9 minutes of training data in the wind tunnel. So very fast to obtain. And also it's very generalizable. So you can then use that in a variety of settings. And yeah, so the key takeaways is that, right, like there is benefit in combining data driven approaches, but instead of thinking of it as a black box, to also ask what is the right inductive bias do I incorporate in this? And model based reinforcement learning is a way to do that, because you can bring in all the inductive bias into learning the model of the dynamics, and that's what we did. And doing that in the Fourier basis turns out to be very effective and cheap. And at the same time, we can incorporate like also the history. This is partially observed, so we're not making a Markovian assumption, and we are making use of onboard sensors, right? So this also the fact of can we outfit these flights with the relevant sensors and where they should be placed is also something we are studying now. So that also remains, like how much can you effectively get information from sensors, how much can you get from history, and how much can you get from the also, right, better models. And so that's what we'll see here, because right now we just used a simple Fourier basis. And so that's a linear representation, right? What if you have nonlinear representations? And we said neural networks, but then they may require too much data. So is there a way to still keep the Fourier inductive bias, but have some nonlinearity for expressivity? And that's where we'll introduce now Fourier neural operators that can effectively model this. And there's also nice theoretical guarantees on being able to capture any underlying operator. So if we are thinking of the fluid dynamics now as solving Navier-Stokes partial differential equations, right? There's a solution operator to that family. So can we learn that itself? Because once we learn that, then we can handle any initial condition, any boundary condition, right? So that becomes much more general and universal. And so that aspect we will deal with it now. But also, as I said, there are many other aspects, right? So can we do better control methods, better ways to place sensors, and of course, much wider range of turbulent conditions and going to even higher Reynolds numbers. So this, opens up a lot of further research, but I think it's very exciting, our ability to do this with very limited time in the wind tunnel and being able to do better than PID and existing controllers. Yeah, so as I mentioned, the next part that I want to address is, can we learn very expressive models of turbulent conditions and other kinds of such complex physical processes, right? What is the way to capture that effectively? And so this is where we develop neural operators here at Caltech. But of course, the question remains, like, why not just use a standard neural network, right? We have convolutional neural networks, we have transformers. Why not just use that? So the reason is because in standard neural networks, you assume that training and testing is done at the same resolution, right? So you train your model at a certain resolution. For instance, if you take ImageNet, right, that has a fixed resolution, your testing is also done on the same data set, right? So you cannot go from training on small images to suddenly testing on large images, right? In general, they don't work very well. And when it comes to fluid dynamics and other phenomena, this is a deal breaker, because we really need to capture the fine scales. And if you're trying to train a model at the finer scales, that becomes way too expensive, right? So are there other approaches that can handle the ability to train at a certain resolution and then test at a different resolution, right? So you're not, then that is much more flexible. But that's how we would do with a numerical method. So if you give me a partial differential equations and ask me to solve it, I can select grid. Of course, I have to select the relevant grid for it to converge. But once I have the, I can go and query anywhere in the domain, right? I can ask, give me the solution at this point here, right? And that point could be anywhere, at any resolution, and also different shapes of grids. So we have this flexibility when it comes to our ability to handle any point in a continuous domain with numerical solvers. But we don't when it comes to neural networks. And so we cannot expect to use neural networks and just have it work across a range of fluid dynamics conditions, across a range of different initial conditions for partial differential equations. Because it may learn well at a certain resolution, but we know that there are a lot of fine scales that matter, right? That are going to change the final answer. So, and that's definitely true with highly turbulent flows. So how do we then capture that and be able to handle these different resolutions? And so this is where we introduce the concept, what we call discretization invariance. So our AI model, I'll tell you what a neural operator is in a minute, but what it's able to do is to be discretization invariant, meaning, once the model is trained, you should be able to evaluate the model at any resolution, at any point in the continuous domain, right? So it's not just limited to the grid of the training data. And the other aspect we require is not just for it to be able to give an answer at any point in the domain, it should have some kind of consistency. Meaning, if you keep refining your mesh, it should converge to a limit. So the idea is, if I have an AI method, right, and then I give this mesh and ask for solutions here after it is trained, right? Not during training. I've already trained the model somehow. And then at test time, I ask it to evaluate everywhere here. And then I ask it to evaluate in a finer grid. And remember, a standard neural network would not be able to do this because it just assumes one fixed grid. But our neural operators can operate at different kinds of grids, different resolutions of grids. And so, but the idea is, it's not just able to evaluate. As you keep refining the grid, the solution given by our AI model should also converge. And so that's something that we require, that you have this consistency that, ultimately in the limit, ideally it should go to the solution operator of the underlying system, right? So what is an operator? Operator is a mapping between function spaces. In case of partial differential equations, it'll be the input domain is the set of initial and boundary conditions, and that you can define it as a function in a continuous domain. So it's not just discrete points, it's in the continuous domain. And the output, of course, is the solution, which is a function again in a continuous domain. So you're mapping a function from one continuous domain to another continuous domain, right? Whereas in a standard neural network, that's not the formulation. You map a fixed dimensional vector or a fixed dimensional object to another fixed dimensional object. And so it's discrete by nature, the way we think about the number of dimensions in a vector or the number of pixels in an image. But that's not the right way to think about for partial differential equations and other physical processes, because ultimately it is something that happens in a continuous domain. And so by formulating this way, we can capture the relevant fine scales. Yeah, and so this is where we see, this aspect that neural operators are able to satisfy properties that standard neural networks do not, right? So as I mentioned here, this discretization invariance of being able to have the query at any point in the output domain. So you don't need to limit to the grid of the training data. You can also take input any point here. And of course, standard neural networks may not even be able to go beyond the training data grid, right? Because it's fixed on that grid. You could do interpolation on top of a neural network. So you train a neural network to output, input and output at a certain resolution. You can then do interpolation to get it to that resolution. But the problem is that may not be a good answer. We do know that if a neural network is only trained on very coarse data, and if you do some standard interpolation, you may not be able to capture the fine scales well. And so that's why it's important to think about neural operators where we guarantee there is universal approximation, meaning it can learn any nonlinear continuous operator, right? So it's guaranteed that there exists within this class relevant neural operator that fully approximates, right? Given infinite data, of course, right? But assuming that is available, this is realizable. So you're able to learn the appropriate operator. And so that's a guarantee we have, which I think is important because you can then universally approximate in the function spaces. So this is, of course, a wish list. I haven't told you what the neural operator is, right? How do we actually solve and get these nice properties? How do we get these tick marks to all these nice properties here? So for this, let me start with 101, which is a linear partial differential equation. So if you're trying to learn a linear operator, of course, what this block would also be a linear operator, right? So think of the diffusion equation. It is a linear partial differential equation. And if you recall your PDE 101, right, the solution for a linear partial differential equation is an integral linear operator. The inverse of differentiation is integration, right? And because the differential equation is linear, the integration is also linear. So if we can come up with a way to learn this integral linear operator, which involves, there's a kernel, this is called the Green's function, right? So the kernel says how different points are related to one another in the domain. And then you're integrating over that kernel to get the output solution. So to say, what is the temperature at any point here in the domain, you would be like integrating over the Green's function for the diffusion equation, and you will come up with what the final solution is for what the temperature is, for instance. So this is well known that it will be of this form for just linear operators, right? But then we don't want to limit to just learning linear partial differential equations. Fluid flows are not linear, right? Navier-Stokes are not linear, they are nonlinear. So this by itself is not enough. What we instead want to do is to combine it with nonlinear activations. So if we have a block that learns an integral linear operator, then we know with this we can learn the solutions of linear partial differential equations. But we don't want to limit to only that. We want to go to nonlinear equations like Navier-Stokes. And for that, we need to introduce nonlinearity in our network. And that's where you see here we have like nonlinear activations. And by composing them together, what we get is a framework for universal approximation. So meaning with this framework, it's expressive enough to learn any nonlinear operator, including Navier-Stokes. And so that's kind of the guarantee we can provide here because we are able to learn effective integral linear operators. I'll tell you in a minute what is the exact architecture with which we learn, but we're able to do this and we're able to compose it with nonlinearity, so we get very expressive models. So the way we go about learning the integral linear operator is to learn for convolutions in the continuous domain. And these can be effectively solved with Fourier transforms. So if you recall signal processing 101, convolution becomes multiplication in the Fourier domain, right? So you can solve for convolution by doing multiplication in the Fourier domain. And so what that effectively ends up happening is now learning the Fourier transform of your kernel. And so that's effectively some coefficients. So the way to think about this architecture is we have now our input on which we take the Fourier transform, and then we learn the frequency coefficients, right? This matrix R, we are learning how to change different frequencies, how to multiply different frequencies, what should be the coefficients. And then we can do inverse Fourier transform and go back to the standard domain. And so with this block, we can solve an integral linear operator. But then we compose it with nonlinearity, right? So we are not just doing learning the Fourier coefficients. That's what we did in the earlier work. That was just a linear model. We directly just learned coefficients in the Fourier domain, and we use that to predict the dynamics. But if you want a very general model that works across all kinds of turbulent conditions, it solves for the partial differential equations, in the whole domain. What we'll need is a much more general and expressive model because we know the solution operator for fluid flows is nonlinear, right? Navier-Stokes solution the equations are nonlinear. And so that's what this kind of combines. It combines this linear framework of learning in the Fourier domain, which is very effective. We saw that in the earlier work that you can learn very well in the Fourier domain. It captures that inductive bias with nonlinear learning as well. So it has both the expressivity and the nice inductive bias. But of course, one question remains, right? So how does this make it discretization invariant? So it turns out that you can do Fourier transform at any resolution, right? So if you've trained at a certain resolution and your test data is higher resolution, you can still apply FFT at any resolution. And so that's what gives it the flexibility to not just limit to one resolution, you're able to now extend beyond the resolution you've trained and still give predictions there. And in order to help with that and give a good regularization, what we propose is to only filter out and keep low frequency modes when we are doing this learning in the Fourier domain. So we are also filtering out, which is an additional regularization. And of course, if you had no nonlinearity and you only did this filtering process, that would be a bad approximation, right? Because that means you're ignoring the higher frequency component. And that is bad because we know that matters a lot for turbulence. So on the other hand, here it's okay because have nonlinear activations and we are doing multiple such learning in the Fourier domain. So with nonlinear transformations, even if you filtered high frequency modes, you will learn end to end how to transform those high frequency components back into low frequency through a nonlinear transform. So you can kind of keep this end-to-end learning. With this, you can capture the whole spectrum. In fact, we show in our experiments that you capture high-frequency components as well effectively. And at the same time, you have good regularization and with that, good generalization. And so this is where we see that, with Fourier neural operator as a proof of concept here, we trained on just low resolution fluid flow data, right? So that was just 64 by 64 by some number of time points in time. And then once we trained the model, we directly evaluated it on higher resolution data. So our initial conditions at test time are at a higher resolution than the training data. And it's still able to do that effectively. So what we call zero-shot super resolution, right? In the machine learning term, zero-shot means you didn't train for it. You have a change in the distribution between training and test. And we're able to do super resolution, meaning we're able to go beyond the resolution of the training data. And we're able to do that effectively. And so this is what gives it the ability to capture the finer scales well. And this ability comes because it's learning the mixing of different Fourier modes along with nonlinear representations. So it's able to also kind of figure out how would these frequency modes along different nonlinear transformations mix, right? And with that, it's also able to predict beyond the training resolution. So in a way, what it's effectively doing is interpolation, but implicitly, right? So you don't have an explicit interpolation. It's just being done directly in the model, and it's being learned end to end. And that's what makes it able to approximate the underlying solution operator of the Navier-Stokes equation effectively. So if we like, in many settings, we could also incorporate more of the physics knowledge. So what I describe now is completely data-driven, right? So I give you the, in the previous example here, what I did was I took a whole bunch of initial conditions for fluid flow and then looked at its trajectory, how it evolves. So that was my training data, right? So I was just, learning on all those trajectories and then using that for prediction. But I made no assumption or I didn't use the equations themselves. I have the differential equations. I'm just not using them so far in my training. But in the next extension, in physics-informed neural operator, we can also incorporate for equation law. So we can say, well, how do these equations, right, help in training? Because I know that any solution should satisfy these equations. So I can use that as a loss function, and I can encourage my output to be where this equation loss is zero, right? So you satisfy the equation. So we can combine any training data with also now an additional loss that penalizes if your solution is not, agreeing with the equation, right? So that's something we can add. And with that, we can do this very effectively. And we can also, with this, drive down the error even further, because you can train this first. This is the pre-trained model. You give it a whole bunch of initial conditions and get the solution predictions. But now at test time, if you now have a new initial condition, you also have the equation for that. So you can further fine-tune your pre-trained model to satisfy the equation. So you can drive down the error further. And what this also helps us is with transfer learning. So you can learn with Reynolds number 100, and then if you want to do transfer learning and also solve for Reynolds number 500, you can use the pre-trained model, even though there's a shift in distribution, right? These are two different distributions. You can converge faster because with the physics laws, you know what changed. It was the Reynolds number that changed between those two, right? So it can adapt faster because of that knowledge. So these are some of the frameworks we developed, and then we wanted to ask, how well can we use this to model turbulent flows, and using again experimental data. So if we can record like the turbulence flows with the PIV, and be able to, can we directly just learn from that, and how well can we do to model very high turbulent flows. And so, yeah, just a reminder again that this would ultimately be necessary for flying in our urban environments and other challenging conditions. So as you can see here, this is our setup. This is in water. We started with water, and then we ultimately also want to go to air. And so we are recording these kind of like here you can see vortices and others being formed. Right, so we are recording it with a camera, and these are like kind of examples of different Reynolds numbers. So we could, record it on a range of different Reynolds numbers, and then we want to ask for predictions here. And you can see that, there is the X component, right? So here, if you see, there is a cylinder. So the idea is there's a flow, there is a cylinder, so we can capture like the vortex shedding and those principles, because there's a, right, with the cylinder we'll have those disturbances, and then the question is, can we learn that effectively? And so given this, there is the X component, right, where the flow will proceed further, and then there'll be along the Y component like the vortex and other disturbances, the shedding behavior that you'll see. And so you see that here in the X component, it's kind of like flowing, right? And the Y, there is all these disturbances, and you want to capture them. And we do this on a variety of like Reynolds numbers. I think a few thousand, maybe 3,000 is like the largest one in this setting. And what you can see is as it becomes higher Reynolds numbers, right, there is disturbances. And because this is also experimental data, there's more noise as well. So there's more measurement noise. And our hope is, can we have these neural operators mostly learn to ignore the experimental noise, right? And just kind of focus on the overall behavior, because that's what we need to control drone flights and other, flights ultimately. So the hope here is it can kind of like still be able to predict the trajectory even as it gets more noisy and of course highly non-stationary. And so what we see here is the ability to, right, like kind of predict given a certain cylinder configuration, but we wanted to also evaluate it under different cylinder configurations. So there was one where we moved the cylinder. So initially there was cylinder at certain location, we moved it here. And then we have like two cylinders side by side here. So there's very different conditions, right? So we don't expect it to work as well because the distribution has changed. But ultimately, our hope is if we can capture general vortex shedding behavior, we can kind of not just limit to one configurations, because in the real world, there's all kinds of like configurations that it should work on. And so that was a question, can it capture the physics even in settings beyond its training data? And so here we see now the ability to generalize in the moved cylinder. So now we've moved the cylinder from its initial configuration. And what you see is that even though the cylinder was moved, right, so it's able to kind of keep track of the disturbances. So here you can see that, the vortex shedding and like these locations have changed, but it's still able to fairly keep track of that. There's some errors, but not a whole lot. So there's a little bit here, but not, it's still fairly able to keep the trajectory. And so that's kind of the surprising aspect, right? It's not just like limited to one configuration of the cylinder and one kind of wind speed or flow speed, and it's able to learn that well. That many neural networks would be able to do. But here we see good generalization beyond its training. And same on the Y component as well, that you can see it being able to capture that even under this moved cylinder settings. And so this is the plot here where you see like kind of, right, so there's of course, a worse error compared to the original configuration, because here the training and testing data was the same. Here the testing data has now a different distribution, but it's still having a graceful degradation of errors. So over time, here you can see it's still able to track to a good extent. But of course, if we want to bring down these errors as well, we can ask, what does transfer learning do? So if I now can also additionally train on the data with the new cylinder configuration, right? But with a small amount of such data, how much does my error improve? And indeed, we see some improvement. So here, as you can see, especially over a longer time period, we can bring down the error. And so that's the idea, that these models already have good inductive bias. They seem to capture like the physics of vortex shedding and generalize beyond the configuration it is trained on. And at the same time, we can further do transfer learning and quickly bring down the errors even further. And as you can see, this, we can do long-term predictions, right? So this one here, you can see the Reynolds number from 630 to about 3000. There isn't a very big, again, change in error, right? So it's still able to gracefully predict even under higher Reynolds numbers, and that's our hope, that we can get to much higher. Of course, you would need some more training data as we increase the Reynolds number, but it's still very tractable to go beyond, and that's kind of where we want to head. Because our ultimate goal is to combine what we did in the first part with Falcon, where we have onboard flow sensors, and we can train a model like Fourier neural operator that understands physics of vortex shedding in a range of conditions. But you also further have online reinforcement learning, right? You can adapt and you can kind of fine tune from that, and with that be able to do very challenging turbulent conditions. And so that's our goal, to kind of combine this sparse sensing with Fourier neural operators and be able to do that very effectively. So of course, as I said, that's kind of part of the future work, to go to like the sensor settings with the wing configuration, and ultimately, right, free flying drones and much more complex geometries and three-dimensional flows, and like kind of scale all this up to much more realistic settings. So in the remaining time, I want to show you a few other examples we've done with neural operators, right? So where we can like capture the turbulence and other phenomena. And indeed, turbulence is a big part of weather prediction here. You see the atmospheric rivers outside in action. And what we have done here is also, our ability to capture that very well with these neural operators. So you can see here in the overlay diagram that it's able to capture the atmospheric river prediction very effectively and over very long ranges. So these are thousands of miles wide in the Pacific Ocean. And of course, that has a big impact here in California, right? How they evolve and how much of it hits the California coast, results either in storms or in droughts, right? If it doesn't hit. And so predicting these currents and their impact here on the weather is important. And what we were able to do is to use these neural operator frameworks and train it on all the historical weather data. We have a wealth of data available from the 70s. That is reanalysis data. It's available in the open. And we can take that and train our model. And we are able to now do this much faster predictions than current numerical weather models. about 45,000 times faster, right? So there are multiple reasons for it. One is these numerical weather models are run on a CPU cluster. In fact, they take a big CPU cluster and take several hours to update their forecasts. Whereas our AI-based method is on a GPU, on a single GPU in less than a second, you can get now new predictions, right? So this is lightning fast because of like the ability to utilize GPUs. But more than that, it's utilizing all this historic weather data. It's data driven. Whereas these numerical weather models are based on solving partial differential equations with numerical solvers, and they use only a few parameters in those partial differential equation system to be calibrated using all that historic weather data, right? So they're making very ineffective and inefficient use of data that is available. And that's kind of the really the potential, right, of transformation that you can see with AI, that ability to use data to improve our modeling. You saw that also in the first work, right? We used reinforcement learning. We could do better than the PID control. And here, similarly, we can do better than numerical weather models and be very effective. So we're also using this to model other kinds of flows, like multi-phase flow systems for carbon capture and storage as one of the applications. So indeed, climate change is a big issue, right? And we have to find all kinds of ways to get to net zero. And a lot of experts believe that we need to capture carbon in for some form of the other. And one solution is to ask, can we capture carbon dioxide and store it underground in wells with water? And so to do that, you need to be able to accurately model how much carbon dioxide can be stored underground, right? What is the gas leakage probabilities? What is the pressure buildup and all of this? And this is where we were able to now do these predictions on multiple such reservoir wells. And so this is the input to the model. So you have like from all the geo analysis, this permeability map, right? How permeable are these different wells? How much is the connection between them? And so that'll help us model like kind of the gas leakage and other properties. And this is what you see here. How much is the gas saturating in these wells with water? So we model it through a Darcy flow kind of a system, which is for a multi-phase flow system. And we're able to do this about 700,000 times faster than current numerical weather models. And so that's where this is able to effectively capture this kind of nonlinear evolution very effectively. So we're also predicting deformation in materials, which involves changing geometries, right? So as you're impinging on a plastic body, its shape changes, but we are able to capture those as well with these neural operators. And ultimately with this, you can do inverse design. So in this simple example, what we asked was, can you design for this airfoil to be optimizing for drag versus lift, right? So can you minimize this design objective and look at what is the optimal configuration and the optimal shape? And so as you can see, surrounding here, the fluid, right, the air turbulence simulation is being done, but it's being done directly. So that's the other benefit of having these neural operators, because now these are differentiable. So once you have the forward model, which simulates, given a certain geometry of an aircraft wing and a certain right angle, what is the drag versus lift, right? So it's able to predict the whole flow field, and with that, able to tell you what is the drag versus lift for a specific configuration. That's the forward model. We can directly do inverse design because we can use that model, it's differentiable, and we can directly optimize for design. And so we're able to do this very fast. And in a recent work, we were able to do this to design a better medical catheter that reduces bacterial contamination by about 2 orders of magnitude. So the idea is, in a catheter, what you have is fluid flow, right? This is used in hospitals for drawing all kinds of fluids. But as that is happening, there is the danger of bacteria swimming upstream to the flow and getting into the body, getting into somebody's organs. And so this is dangerous, and this is what results in all kinds of infections. So how do we avoid this? And so one idea is to design relevant grooves to trap the bacteria and prevent them from swimming upstream. But how effectively can we do this? What should be the shapes of the grooves? How should they be spaced out? And so instead of doing this as trial and error, we directly optimize this in our AI model. And so here you can see that initially this was like kind of the amount of like bacterial contamination, right? So the idea is this: the starting point, it's swimming upstream and it still has certain bacterial contamination. And after optimization, you can see that we've reduced the bacterial contamination by a lot because it's able to do that. And you can see that for different configurations, you're questioning what is the best way to reduce that bacterial contamination. So we can directly optimize in this design space, and we can, kind of like a video here, you can kind of see that it's able to trap a lot of the bacteria with those grooves there. So the bacteria is trapped. And so kind of the message here is, we can use neural operators for speeding up simulations, get accurate solutions of partial differential equations, handle a whole variety of conditions like turbulent conditions, generalize well, get really good speed ups, but also ultimately design, right? Be able to design effectively all kinds of, new aspects, and do that very fast, and do that as direct design optimization. So yeah, I think I'm very excited how AI is impacting these domains. I think there's a lot of room for being data driven, and with the right formulation of AI models, we bring in all the knowledge that is built up with traditional methods, right, with numerical methods, but make it much faster and be able to adapt to changing conditions much more effectively. Thank you.